All right, welcome back to Gambler's Podcast, Dark Side of Gambling. This is episode 4. I left off last time talking about the hole I started to dig myself while living in Vegas. And one of the things I mentioned was the ability to get pretty significantly large loans in a state like Nevada, or really specifically Vegas. With the activity that goes on, they allow you to go pretty wild when it comes to loans. And my first real dip into major debt began with me finding out that I could get pretty significantly large loans, and really all it was based on was my work paycheck, so my income. So if my income said that I could, handle something, it definitely gave me as much as it could in terms of qualification. So by the end of kind of my cycle of borrowing from payday lenders to pay other payday lenders, and then trying to use some of it to win money back at the casino, I ended up going into payday loan debt in Vegas for probably around 18,000 dollars, I want to say. And I wasn't very, I guess, well versed in kind of what it sounded like in terms of process out there. I was more paranoid of them calling my work when I was late, because it's not like a traditional loan where they're just gonna collect normally, and then if you don't pay, it kind of goes through that charge off process and hit your credit. When it comes to payday lenders, a lot of them will be calling your work. They'll be asking, for you by name, and that kind of exposes you to the employees at the work. So it was pretty embarrassing trying to avoid that and trying to find ways around that, because it was going to affect my career. And at that time, I was doing pretty good. Like I said, I was making, in the low six figures, with a bonus. So I was in a position where I did not want anybody to know what was going on. So I ended up borrowing money from a family member to be able to pay these debts off. This is money aside from what I already borrowed from some people as well. This was money that I thought that was going to give me a fresh start, a second chance. I'm done with this madness, and so I borrowed the money. I paid off all these payday loans, and somehow I proceeded to uh, convince myself at some point shortly thereafter to try to win money again, to get back some of that money, and pay it back, from where I borrowed it. And so in my mind, I kept chasing losses that I really didn't need to chase at the time. I really could have just ended everything there, maybe made a payment plan to pay this family member back over time. And they weren't even pressing me, so it wasn't like I was being pressed about it. I just couldn't, I couldn't see reality, which was, you need to stop now, cut your losses and move along. So rather than cut my losses and move along, because I actually got out of it for the moment, I jumped right back in to try to get it all back. And trying to get it all back, I borrowed once again from lenders that put me in that same position, except this time I couldn't, I really couldn't pay him back. And so luckily, I was able to dodge a lot of the phone call to work kind of situations, by calling them and making sure they didn't call, just kind of keeping into communication. But I still put myself into debt, which I couldn't get back out of because I really didn't have the ability to do so. Now, my work, because of the type of bonuses that we would get at the very end of the year, I just so happened to had done pretty well that year, and we were getting bonuses that were pretty significant. And so this was my highest bonus of all time, even after that. This is just one of those kind of random bonuses that I got over the years, and it was roughly about $20,000. And they paid it out at the beginning of the year. So after the year ended, so it was paid out sometime in January. And that was the same time it was getting close to Super Bowl time. Now, this was probably um, another one of those significant moments where, I went overboard, and I proved to myself that I couldn't have nice things. I couldn't have, a significant amount of money in my account without being extra cautious. So uh, I didn't, I didn't think about it. I basically thought that I would make an incredible investment by using my bonus money. on the Super Bowl. And this was a Super Bowl where, you know, it was one of those where you think that you know what's supposed to happen, and what's supposed to happen just simply doesn't. And it was one of those years where you thought that Peyton Manning or whoever was gonna make it to the Super Bowl and win it all uh, as the best team in the league at the time. And what I thought I knew wasn't what I knew, and I spent a lot of money and ended up ultimately losing close to uh, the entire amount that I had. And so that put me in another position where, in my mind, I was trying to make a comeback. I was trying to, uh, I was trying to, find a way to chase losses again that I didn't need to take, but I took the losses anyways. And so I kept convincing myself that I needed to chase that loss. And so that was probably the final straw for me in terms of, you know, what I was doing in Vegas. You know, I lost obviously, most of, if not all of what I earned over there. I put myself in a position where it was a place that you could live for very cheap. Rent was cheap. Lifestyle was cheap if you could just stay out of the casinos. And I spent so much time in the casinos, I wasted an opportunity to save money because you had a nice house, only paying 1,300 or so a month in rent, and I could more than afford it. But not only could I not afford it by the end of it, but I was struggling to maintain my rent payments. I put myself in a position where we almost got evicted multiple times because I would gamble off my rent money, thinking that I would win enough to be able to cover the rent and some of what I owed. And that just never worked out, and I thought that losing money on a Super Bowl one time in that fashion was enough. But another year goes by, and I'm in my last, I guess, run in Vegas in terms of just living there before I move. And another Super Bowl comes around, and another bonus is in my pocket. Except this time it's not as much as it was the last year. And in this case, it wasn't Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl, getting beat by the Seattle Seahawks. I don't even remember what it was at the time. I think it was that year was maybe the Seahawks, and the next year, I don't remember exactly who was in the Super Bowl, but I ended up doing about the same thing, losing a lot of money. I may have won a couple bets, but I lost most of it, and then found myself moving back to California. And in my mind, I thought, hey, you know, why not just take this as an opportunity to that's it, fresh start once again. Take your losses. You owe some people money. Nothing that you probably can't get out of in the next 3 or 4 years. But that wasn't enough for me to walk away. That was just, unfortunately, another reason to find a way to continue doing what I do, but from a distance. And at the time, I wasn't really trying to play offshore type of gambling. I was very much still in tune with Vegas. I lived there. I didn't really see a reason to do offshore betting, anything like that. And the reason why that's the way I felt was because I, had some friends in Vegas that were able to place wagers for me. And so, if you wager in Vegas, you have to have one of their casino apps if you're doing it on an app. And one of their casino apps, you basically have to be GPS pinged within the area. So you can't wager, on a Vegas app for a Vegas casino from California, but I was able to give my login to somebody. And so I would have those particular people who also worked with me at the company at the time place wagers for me throughout the day. I would make a deposit with my card, and then they would make whatever wager that I wanted, and that was kind of the cycle that it would go through over the course of, probably at least the next year or two. It got to a point where it was just becoming, I guess, what we call a big distraction, for the people who were helping me place these wagers, to the point where even I, had to, ultimately. cut myself out of that and had to figure out something else. And so that was, probably something that lasted around a year and a half before I figured, hey, I need to do something that I can control in my hand, that I don't have to call somebody, that nobody else is knowing about. And so that's where I moved on to two different things. One was daily fantasy sports. Because it was legal in California, it was not legal in Nevada. In California, you could play fantasy sports, but you cannot sports bet. In Nevada, you can sports bet, but you can't play the daily fantasy sports. So I had to kind of learn something new in my eyes. I felt like I had the same set of skills. I just would apply it to the sports world with, whatever this kind of works out with. And since I played a lot of season long fantasy, I figured, hey, why not? I love fantasy sports. I can make some money doing this. Let's just go ahead and play this out. And so I would, I made a DraftKings account at first. Um, and then when I made the DraftKings account, I made a FanDuel account as well. And I had some early success, a couple, $1,000 or $2,000 tournament wins. I was always looking for the big win. I was looking for something that could get me, something above the rest in terms of, I wasn't really looking for a double up. I was looking for a 5 or 6 or 10 times whatever I put in. I wanted that. I wanted a big one. I wasn't playing to play head to head with somebody. I wasn't playing it smart, which, if you're, let's say, a professional gambler or professional in whatever these areas are, and you have some type of discipline and, you know what a bankroll is and you can manage it, maybe you might not fall into the same pitfalls that I did, but that's not the way I played it. That's not the way I operated. I operated in a way where it was very reckless, large buy-ins into not really great payouts, but appeared that way if you ended up finishing top one, two, three, or four. So over time, I spent a lot of my days during work setting up my lineups and figuring out, what was what, and I would win some money, lose some money, ultimately losing more than winning for the most part for that first couple of years playing. And, I hit a place where I figured out one particular sport I was doing well with, and I started to really capitalize on that. I was, I was winning, and I was also losing at the same time. But some of the wins that I was having were so big that it pushed me further to make sure that I kept going. So, and I'll tell you some of these wins. I remember I invested, I think $33 in one tournament, ended up winning $20,000, and I won a couple that day, and then I knew what I did. I had a formula, and I said, okay, well, if I just continue this, maybe I'll win it again. And I ended up winning multiple first places. I won, 10,000, a 5,000, 3,000, 4,000. I just won a bunch of pretty significantly large buy-ins, and I was doing really well, to the point where I even paid off some of my debts that I owed to people, because in the same time frame, that I was starting this, I had already built up some debt borrowing from people around me. Because that's just, that's the way it was when I got back from Vegas. When I was losing here, I had to borrow money to be able to pay back, to be able to continue to play, to pay more back. So I actually did pay some people back. I paid some of my debts to the point where, again, I probably could have walked away and, still taken a loss, still owed some people some money, but put myself in a position where I didn't really have to worry about too many different debts. I was able to narrow it down, and I probably would have been okay, owing whatever I had owed at the time, which might have been 50, $60,000, something like that. But that didn't stop. That didn't stop me from trying to get right back in there and make more. And the problem was I didn't really have any discipline. I didn't really have a game plan. I just kept doing the same thing. And when I was done playing one sport, I moved on to the next sport. And then those losses started to kick in. And so, when the season ended for the sport that I felt like I was good at, I moved into another game. And then that game, which happened to be football, cost me a lot of money. And as it cost me a lot of money, I began to borrow from people more and more and more again. And I began to, find myself in the cycle as I'm doing this whole time. Again, I'm not telling my girlfriend about this. I'm not telling my family, my coworkers. I am I'm really just talking to myself about it, unless I'm winning. And when I'm winning, then I'm kind of bragging a little bit, saying, "Hey, here's what I did. Check this out. Pretty amazing, isn't it? I'm probably the top 1% player." In all reality, I was just trying to make myself feel better about something that I was doing that really wasn't a good idea. So I continued to lose. I continued to lose in fantasy, but I was masking it by continuing to play. And when it kind of got very deep, I said, you know what, maybe this isn't going to work. I need to bet again. And that's when I started to go into really offshore betting. And so this is where I basically wiped out having to communicate with anybody else but myself and the casino at this point. And I used a few different websites that I accessed for offshore. They accepted cryptocurrency deposits, and it seemed like quick payouts. So this is where I'm at a point where I'm now in my 30s. I'm definitely a lot more mature, and I seem to have this gap that I'm trying to bridge between always feeling in a need to gamble. And so whether that was betting, whether that was um, you know playing fantasy games or whatever, I was getting to a point where I was doing way too much. I was just doing way, way, way too much. And I started to get into the betting so much that, it really, really took an impact on probably more than ever in my everyday life. And the reason for that is because when you're betting on these offshore websites, you have the ability to wager at any time of the night, all day, and there's live wagering. So there's always something happening. There's always some kind of action, and they make sure of it. And one of the biggest things that I found out about myself is, about how degenerate that I really, really, really could be. Was when COVID started to kind of roll around, and at that time, I remember it was, March of 2020 or so when everything started to really get shut down officially, sports wise and everything. And I was losing my mind because it was in the middle of the basketball tournaments, I think NCAA tournaments and things like that. It was in the middle of, NBA season. It was in the middle of, what I would consider the action that I enjoyed and the betting that I was doing. And so we were unable to wager on any major events for the next, handful of months, whatever the case was. And I put myself in a position where, I ended up having to, rather than just use it as an opportunity to quit, I use it as an opportunity to become even more degenerate. And I didn't think I could already become more degenerate. I started to bet on whatever was available, and that was usually some sort of an esports game. I think League of Legends. There was a lot of table tennis um, across the world in Russia, Ukraine, different places. There was there was some really weird types of options for betting. Let's put it that way. And I think the closest thing I got to normal sports was probably when Korean baseball started to kind of get back into play. So when I get to a point where um, I'm finding myself betting on things that I just shouldn't bet on, I wasn't saving money at this time. I wasn't being responsible. I was putting myself in a position where, hey, you know what? There's definitely going to be more here. There's definitely something I could make. I could probably find an edge, and then I'll take this edge into whenever we end up starting whatever sports seasons next. After COVID kind of lets up. But I put myself in tremendous debt at the time, um, and I was asking people, to borrow. I was asking to borrow money from people who were also having a tough time because the economy wasn't good. People were losing their jobs, because, you had to be locked up in your house. And some places were closed. So I was being really irresponsible when it came to thinking about everybody else. I just could only think about myself, my, you know, urge to gamble, or in my mind, to make money. And I probably cost myself a lot of goodwill with people, a lot of good relationships, because the borrowing kind of got crazy at that time. Rather than, like I said, when I had won a bunch of money, paid people back, stepped away from that, I went back and borrowed from the exact same people. And I'll get a little bit deeper into how I borrowed, and the depth in which the borrowing kind of sunk me further, because not only did I borrow from people, but I promised, that I'll pay back with interest, and things that I really couldn't keep up with. So we'll touch on that in the next episode as well. But I appreciate you stop by. Hit that subscribe button while you're here, and I'll see you on the next episode.